thinking this was the way to go.
Hey, pleasure to see you all again in another exciting episode of Unnamed and Unmade. We source inspiring stories from accomplished entrepreneurs and share those great insights with you. Today we have Neil Sikka, CEO and founder of A1 Logic. Neil has been working in the technology space for more than 10 years. He brings a lot of real world experience solving problems for clients with technology. We are very pleased to have you, Neil, today in our talk show.
Thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to be here.
Great. All right, so why don't we kick off the discussion, Neil, with getting to know more about you and what you do as part of A1 Logic.
Yeah, so I'd say that probably my career goal is to make the world safer through innovations in cybersecurity. However I do that, whether it's inside of a big corporation, like when I started at Microsoft, or outside of a big corporation when I started my own company. So I've been, specifically with innovation, I've been focusing on innovation, basically to think different. And so A1 Logic is it's a company that I started based on a patent that I got on a new way to stop data breaches. And so I've learned a lot so far in it not about tech actually, but about people. So as the CEO, I have to wear multiple hats. I have to think about, getting the patent. I have to think about engineering and product design, hiring people, marketing, raising money, all of that stuff.
That's great to hear. So far, I believe it has been a rewarding experience for you. You also mentioned that you were working with Microsoft earlier before you started thinking about bringing your own product to the market. If you can back up and share with us some experiences working in Microsoft, how did that instill this passion in you to solve problems for people, especially in cybersecurity, and how did that give you the confidence to start something on your own?
Yeah, so probably I'd say the best place to work if you're 22 years old as a computer engineer is Microsoft. I learned so much there. Like everybody there is really smart and they have the resources to be successful. They are very successful in what they do. And the first few years I was there, I was just trying to take projects that I didn't know anything about so I could learn and learn and learn. That was my core focus in that part of my career, was just learning as much as I could. And also trying to learn not just technical stuff, but also how does the business run? How do they market? How do they promote products? And internally what happens with different groups and all of that. So I was working on Microsoft Security Response Center. You can think of it like Microsoft's anti-hacker group.
Got it.
And we were looking at a lot of attacks on the internet and trying to understand how to stop these attacks. The group that I was working in was, you could say, like scientists. They were so high end. They were really good. That hallway was like probably one of the best in the industry. And I was honored to be even sitting next to them. I learned a lot from them, but one of the things that I saw was that what we were doing was so scientific and almost academic that I didn't think it had huge applications to like a giant market. Specifically, there's talking about memory corruption, which is a science. So I wanted to focus on something that would appeal to more people, like stopping data breaches. So that's what A1 Logic does. As I mentioned, it's a new way to stop data breaches. And that's something that I think is a problem that many people can understand and want to fix, not as much the scientific stuff. The people that I worked with are amazing, and I keep in touch with them still. My mentors are there. I still talk to them, and yeah, I'm really fortunate to have had a chance to work there.
That's great. So you started with an innovation mindset, and you had amazing set of resources and network to scale your abilities to innovate. And then you were talking about problems in the marketplace, which you would have been exposed to as you were getting into the weeds of innovating. So how did you go about with that transition, right? Operating from being a pure innovator to someone who wants to solve problems in the market. That's when you actually think about bringing your innovation to the market and adding additional constraints to the whole process of innovation. So if you can talk a bit more about your transition coming out of Microsoft, what did you do to better connect with the market, better empathize with the customers?
Yeah, that was probably one of the scariest things I've done in my life, is to quit Microsoft and then invest everything I had into a new startup. So I'd say probably, as I mentioned earlier, the biggest learning that I had in starting my own company was about people. I was surprised to learn that a software company is about people, not about software. So when you talk about empathizing, empathy, it's understanding things from somebody else's point of view, whether they're working on one of the products, or they're buying the product, or they're investing in the product, or they're funding something else. It's just people all around. As a CEO, you can't do everything yourself, so you have to be with people, and they're the ones they're the team that's going to help you. So you need to be there to support them back. So going from just innovation and technical engineering to trying to go out on my own, it's been a lot about people and learning about people. I actually read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's amazing. It's kind of like an instruction manual for humans. And I also learned that humans are very, very complicated. Like, you think computers are complicated, try understanding a human. They have their emotions, and they're not always as predictable as a computer is. And they're very creative. And so humans are, they're hard and they're to deal with in a different way that computers are. But they're also very rewarding to deal with. When you see people grow and just progress and achieve things.
Sure, makes sense. So can you talk about some of the challenges that you faced when you were trying to establish the product market fit? Now that you started realizing that it's important for you to understand people, it's also important for you as the CEO and founder of your company to ensure that your product is actually meeting the needs of the market. So how did you go about that? And as you were getting more comfortable with interacting, engaging with the people in your ecosystem, that is the cybersecurity software market, how did you go back to the drawing board, work on your actual product innovation, and then map it to the requirements of the market?
Yeah, so that's one thing that I'm still learning and exploring and evolving, is go-to-market strategy. That's what I'm doing here, trying to figure out how sophisticated enterprises buy products. And so one part of that has been actually a challenge for me, is as a very technical guy, trying to make it understandable to normal people, whatever the technology or innovation is very difficult to explain and capture the innovation in regular English. So one of the things I've learned is having someone help you that is not as close to the technology, and probably not as specialized in the technology, but is able to explain to other people and other humans, basically. That has helped a lot. And then learning from them how they've distilled the technology into something that normal people would understand. So it's about people, right? It's communication, how you communicate something very technical. This is a very technical, like, computer science innovation. How do you communicate something so technical in a normal layman's term? That's a big thing that I've been learning. Another thing I've been learning is trying, what you mentioned earlier, empathy, trying to get at what the customer cares about. And maybe you think they should care about something, but they care about something else. Mm-hmm. And so trying to learn, what do they care about, by asking questions and listening.
The unarticulated needs of the customer, and also making the customer recognize that they have a need if they haven't already started shopping for a solution.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious to know more about how you were able to adjust your communication, messaging to specific set of audiences, given the technical nature of your offering. And I know at our dinner yesterday, you said how you were able to relate to the technology people like you, who might find good use for your product. But again, when you are going to the business users, it becomes a challenge to help them see the value of your offering. So before we even go there, if you can give us a technical spiel of the offering, and then give us an example of a scenario where you had to go and pitch your product to the client, and how did you kind of dumb it down for them, so that will be very helpful.
Yeah. So in its core, the technology is a new way to stop data breaches, even if you have malicious insiders, compromised devices, and compromised networks, because it protects data at rest and in transit, but also uniquely in use. And it does all this with a lower total cost of ownership. And so you asked about how to appeal to different people in a corporation, for example. That's basically a customer segmentation exercise, which is what I'm learning here. So there's the business people, and then there's the technical people. The technical people, well, you could say that the difference between the two is how technical they get in the technology. So the technical people, you relate to them by saying, well, from an engineer to engineer, here's a problem, and I can reproduce the problem. Here's a solution, and when I apply the solution, the problem doesn't reproduce. It's like computers, it's like pretty analytical and methodical. So therefore, this solution must have solved the problem. That's how you appeal to them. And for the business people, they think in dollars and they measure in dollars. So you need to relate to them in dollars. And this also goes back to what I was saying earlier about understanding what the person that you're talking about cares about. Do they care about the tech, or do they care about the bottom line or the top line and what it could do for the business? So it's understanding who you're talking to and what they care about and targeting that. And so when they talk about positioning, right, in marketing, it's getting your messaging correct for the audience that you're talking to. You wouldn't talk about, how much money it will save to the engineers. They wouldn't care. And you wouldn't talk about what the technology is to the business people. They wouldn't care. So you'd be missing your audience if you do something like that.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you need to talk the language of the customer that you are pitching your solution. And in some cases, you have few people who do the procurement, few people who are the actual users of the offering, and few people who are simply running the department and ensuring that the investment yields returns in the future. And again, you also have to do this communication and messaging in the context of the competition. You touched upon positioning. So can you talk about some of your competitors in the space and how your offering kind of stacks up with the competition? How do you kind of leverage that? If you have a competitive advantage, how do you kind of leverage that in your marketing, sales efforts as an entrepreneur who is running a startup company?
Yeah, so this is basically the second part of my elevator pitch, which was it protects data at rest and in transit, like all the competitors, but uniquely it protects the data in use as well. So a way to appeal to, this is a technical differentiation that I think a business person wouldn't care about as much. And so this is something you would target at the engineers or the technical people in the customer's organization. So for that, often you would, first make sure that you're talking the same language and everybody agrees on what data at rest and in transit and in use is. And then show them demos. I think people believe what they can see. And so if you can show them demos about here's the competition's product and here's how it's vulnerable, whereas here's my product, and using that same attack, it's not vulnerable, you can see the difference. So that's the differentiation right there.
Got it. So again, we discussed 3 dimensions yesterday during our dinner. The first one is value, the second one is risk, the third one is cost. So which of these dimensions would you go on the offensive? And which of these 3 dimensions would you go on the defensive? Identify ways for you to navigate through that. For example, established players might have a cost advantage that a new player may not have, or established players will have offerings that will be of low risk for the client. So how do you kind of play this game?
Yeah, definitely I'd say startups, if it's an innovative startup, you would do something because it's a better technology, or you can do it cheaper. I think risk you can't really pull out because that's a lot of that is the business. It's a new operation. So in my case, I'd say definitely the biggest strength there is the value. It's a new product that is stronger and has stronger security, and so that's the value that you're getting, followed by cost, because as I mentioned, it's a lower total cost of ownership based on the way the product is designed. The risk is the weakest part right now for a startup, because I think we talked about, like, nobody's ever gotten fired for buying IBM or other big established players. And at the same point, those big players know that they're less risk, so they know that they can charge more for a product with the same or less value. I think, this is the Oracle example we talked about last night, where their products are often very expensive for the same value as, like, free products, open source products, but there's a lot less risk when you buy Oracle, because it's a tried and tested brand and everybody knows them, and they know that they're not going to go out of business tomorrow, and so they're a lower risk profile for anybody that's buying. And also, I think that for enterprise sales and enterprise customers, the risk is a big deal, because it's kind of like their job on the line based on what they buy. If they buy something that's a bad product or messes up something else in their organization, they might be in trouble. So they want to think 10 times about how much risk they're taking.
Got it. So at this point in time, what do you think is the priority for Avon Logic, given that you have a minimum viable product, and you also mentioned that you have established product market fit to some extent. So what are the next set of activities that you would like to do in a very effective, efficient manner to get to to reach the next set of objectives that you have in mind?
Yeah, it's definitely finding a more targeted customer segment than what I currently have, because you can reduce your marketing costs and the customer acquisition costs by being very focused and targeted in who you're going after, and you can reuse a lot of things that you've built and save time in terms of marketing conversations and experience if you go with a specific, narrowly defined customer segment.
Got it. So what is the thought process behind making those strategic choices, right? Like, your product might appeal to multiple use cases, multiple industries, and the way you are defining, you are trying to figure out the beachhead for your particular offering that you can kind of defend and then expand from there. So what are the various constraints and what are the choices that you're making with the resources that you have at your disposal to define that narrow market segment?
Yeah, so one of the big things I'm going after is who would care and understand the differentiation between data at rest and data in transit versus data in use. It would be a very technical organization that really cares a lot about security. I don't think it's someone that's trying to check a compliance checkbox like HIPAA compliance or PCI DSS compliance as much. I think it would be somebody that cares about better security rather than meeting a minimum standard, because minimum standard, you can go with other products that mitigate risk from bigger companies.
Makes sense. And I also know you mentioned about filing for a patent and you got that approved. How is that helping you in the marketing and sales process? Does it give you more credibility? And also going back to the 3 dimensions, right? Value, risk, and cost. Is that kind of helping you, because you have an innovation advantage over other companies which might have a very sophisticated distribution strategy in place. So how are you seeing your company placed from an innovation standpoint, and how are you leveraging the patent that you have?
Yeah, so definitely the patent helps with the value aspect, because it shows that you have something that has a utility and innovation. That's what the definition, the requirements of a patent is. Now, as far as marketing, that's one of the most valuable things, is to have something that, like a patent, that the federal government has investigated and vouches for. So we talked about this earlier last night at dinner, that if you're a business person, you would not have the conversation of, well, here's how the technology works and how the software works and all of that. because that's not your space. Rather, you would say, well, I don't understand the technicalities of what you're doing, but show me somebody else that can vouch for you, that I trust. So if I trust that guy and that guy trusts you, then I trust you implicitly. So that's a lot of it. A lot of a patent is marketing and building legitimacy in your innovation and your product and your company. If you just say it's good because I said so, nobody's going to believe you. But if it's good because U.S. Patent and Trademark Office said so, that's different. It's kind of like getting an education or a degree. You can figure out a lot of these things on your own. Instead of going to computer science school or studying computer science, you can figure it out on your own. But maybe getting your foot in the door or jobs and stuff like that. If you have a university that has given you a degree, they're vouching for you. So the hiring manager doesn't have to figure out like, okay, well, does he know everything that he should be knowing in order to take this job? So it's basically a shortcut to validating somebody. If you don't have the time or the technical or the domain related conversation with them to verify that they know what they should be knowing or they are who they say they are.
Nice. That's a really good segue to the next segment. I know we spent considerable time talking about innovation and then marketing, but when it comes to taking the next step, which is signing the deal with the business and then shipping your product, servicing your product, and supporting the customer and selling more to the same customer and expanding your customer base. That's where trust becomes paramount, and trust ensures that you will be able to perpetuate some of these business relationships. So for your business, how have you thought about the various relationships that you need to maintain, and what are some of the challenges that you are seeing in terms of building the relationship, in addition to obviously establishing the trust with the other parties?
Yeah, so one of the big things that I've seen is that going directly to a big customer is very difficult as a startup because of the risk that we talked about. One of the strategies there is to go through somebody that they trust. And this is kind of the idea that I gave with the patent just now. You indirectly, implicitly trust somebody. So for example, like the US government, they don't work with startups, to buy things and implement them wide scale very frequently. Rather, they work with their trusted, contractors, and that's kind of a distribution channel into the government that they can bring new products and technologies into. So trust it's one of those chicken and egg problems. You have to be trusted in order to be trusted. Yeah, and so it's kind of getting your foot in the door, and that's a hack kind of is going through someone that the customer trusts.
Got it. And how has your, again, going back to innovation, now that you have had a lot of opportunities to engage with the clients, empathize with their position, and also you're gaining a strong understanding of the market, the various players, and also the broader ecosystem around your market category, which is cybersecurity solutions. How has that changed your approach to innovation? Because earlier when you were innovating, you were doing it probably in silo. You know what the state-of-the-art technology is, how that technology can be applied to solve a problem, but you may not have been taking all this into consideration. So how has that kind of refined you as an innovator, if I can say that?
Yeah, one thing is it kind of reinforced the hunch that I had a while ago, that you want to innovate in an area where you're solving a problem that a lot of people care about. So I mentioned the technical stuff earlier, the scientific stuff. I don't think there's as much of a market for that. There's fewer customers than for something that everybody understands. People talk about elasticity and inelasticity. If you look at the most common, like water, everybody needs water, so everybody understands that. So doing something and innovating in an area that people would care about the results of, that's one important thing. Another thing in an enterprise environment is understanding how the customer is using products like yours or other products that are competing to yours or just other software products in general and the cadence and rhythm of their business. So what is their, like, how long does it take for them to procure software? And what is their cycle for buying software? What is their process? And aligning your
Upstream activities.
yeah, your activities along with that. And another thing that I've seen that they look at when they're buying things is how does it integrate with what I already have.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of innovation, figuring out how your product or solution would fit cleanly with what they're already using or with what people commonly already use. Like, I don't know, directory services or things like that in an enterprise.
So you're able to better prioritize and plan your innovation effort, keeping in mind what the market right now requires when it comes to cybersecurity and your specific set of customers that you want to service in the near term. And I know you love innovating and you have a lot more ideas in mind. If you can share with us some other initiatives that you're working on in addition to A1 Logic, which I know that you want to pursue after your MBA program at Chicago booth. But what, in the grand scheme of things, what other initiatives that you have in mind?
I'm very interested in hard problems that apply to a lot of people and that have, when I say hard, I mean like, high barrier to entry. Like you have to really understand how cybersecurity works or how computers work, for example, in my domain. So one of the areas of interest for me is malware. I've been playing with that stuff for like more than a decade now, and understanding how malware works, how to stop it, how to detect it, all that kind of stuff. So that's a big area of interest for me because it affects a lot of people. People talk about ransomware these days, and malware is evolving very quickly, and so the defenders are not able to keep up clearly, and so understanding malware and having a lot of experience with it and seeing things differently so that you can innovate. So I'll give you an example. Maybe reading specifications of some standard that people don't really think about anymore, but everybody uses from the point of view of a security or a malware guy. To understand, well, how does a malware interact with something that everybody uses today, so that you can maybe find new ways to detect it based on that standard. So it's kind of a technical example, but like looking at things that everybody uses and that people don't look at as much anymore, and seeing how you can repurpose it for a new function. That's basically what my first innovation was, is looking at something that everybody has in their computers in a new way, and how I could use it for security rather than what it's meant for. And the reason I say what everyone uses already is because if you look at the tech industry, once there's a standard, it never gets changed. They don't change standards. They just like put band-aids on top of the standard. So it's like an ant comes and puts a crumb here, and then another ant puts another crumb, and then they just keep doing that, and there's a giant mountain. That mountain is never moved. Like you move the table instead. So, yeah, it's that's just once everybody invests in infrastructure and standards in the industry, they don't change it. They just hack around it and put band-aids on it. So as an innovator, if you want to fit in with what everybody else already has and is already using and might adopt, you need to bend backward to figure out how you can use what they already have in a new innovative way to get a new functionality out of it.
Correct. So more like, so you are interested in testing the limits of a certain system, exposing the weaknesses and find ways to strengthen it, bolster it. And right now you have a specialization in developing malware, testing it in security systems, and you think the same set of techniques, toolkits can be applied in a completely different space. So I'm also very happy that you are thinking about it from the perspective of the customers, right, from an application standpoint, and then thinking about how your innovation, which is founded on robust technologies, can be applied in those contexts. So as an entrepreneur, I believe you have been working on A1 Logic for many years now, and you're also taking an MBA program from Chicago booth to further enhance your business acumen. What were some of the major lessons that you have learned so far you wish you had known them when you first started A1 Logic?
I'd say definitely the marketing piece. As a computer engineer, they never taught us marketing in school. At Microsoft, we were just like in the lab, just working on our computers all day. The marketing piece is like a really big part of the business because it's understanding how you're going to appeal and to whom you're going to appeal, and using that information to kind of guide your product and therefore your company. So I'm taking marketing strategy right now. That's a really great class. That's my favorite class this quarter with Sanjay Dar, and he's really good, and he's teaching us a lot about the go-to-market, which is what I'm here to learn. I need to learn go-to-market. So I think learning about marketing is very valuable, and then also strategy. I think strategy often happens in larger organizations that have more moving parts. In startups, it's often about focusing on like what one thing you're trying to do, and then growing laterally.
Yes. Yeah, in large organizations, they worry about how to utilize the many resources that they have. In small organizations, you have limited resources. How can you enhance the value throughput with those resources?
Yeah.
I'm glad you have a lot of takeaways from your experience as an entrepreneur, and that's one great thing about entrepreneurship. You test your own limits. You learn a lot about you, your company, the people that you work with, and over a period of time that keeps accruing and definitely improves the outcomes of whatever initiatives that you guys do. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you today, and I'm very much excited for A1 Logic. So thank you very much for taking the time to talk to the unnamed and unmade audience today. Wish you good luck.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vivek. It was awesome talking to you.
That's a nice conversation.
Yeah, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Cool, man.
I just want to ensure I'm still recording it.
Yeah.